Hello, Workplace Math 10 students. Today we're going to be looking at the second part of our graphing unit, which is going to be discussing line graphs again, but this time in the context of line graphs that show travel or distance traveled. So the assignment that you'll be seeing in Google Classroom is called G2, and it's line graphs, and the actual Mathletics assignment is called travel graphs. So let's get into this. So just a reminder that, that basically a graph is a visual representation of data. So basically why we make graphs is usually to allow us to quickly see trends or patterns that occur in large amounts of data. It's just a way for us to quickly take in the sort of what the information, what the numbers are showing us. Now, once again, there are two different types of data. Not always will it be numbers per se. So there is what we call numerical data, which, as the name would suggest, includes numbers. And examples of this would be, for example, the number of people that attended the movie theater over a course of a month. We can easily count that. We can have that information in number form. But then there's also a type of information called categorical data. And categorical data is a data that usually groups information into similar characteristics. So if we had information and we wanted to group them into how teenagers respond to it, how 20-year-olds respond to it, how 50-year-olds respond to it, that would be an example of categorical data. Now, we're going to, in this unit, be looking at a number of different types of graphs. And the one that we are continuing to look at today is what we call line graphs, but we also, like we talked about last day, we'll be looking at bar graphs, pie graphs, pictographs, and histograms eventually. So just an overview of what a line graph is again. A line graph, this was an example of a line graph we looked at last day, which compared population to the years. And today we're going to be looking at another type of line graph, and this compares the distance traveled over time. But most of the time, what you'll see with a line graph is that it shows something changing over a period of time. And it usually represents numerical data. So the assignment that you are given today is one called travel graphs. That's what you will see in Mathletics. So I'm just going to go through quickly 4 different questions that you will see and how you would go about answering them. So the first question is, what is the distance from start after 15 minutes? So the start is at time 0, and to 15 minutes is right here. And what we have done is we have gone from 0 kilometers all the way up to this point here, which is hard to tell exactly what that is. But when we look at that closely, it looks like it's not quite up between halfway between 15 and 20. So that looks like it is 17, and that is why that would be the correct answer. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So let me just erase this off here and we'll move on to the next question. So the next question is asking, it says, during what time period was the car traveling the fastest? So in this case here, we can see that the distance is the key, or what's going to tell us when the car traveled the fastest. So it went up from 0 all the way to 20, looks like 4 kilometers an hour, 24 kilometers in a 15-minute period. So this is when the car traveled the fastest. So in this range from 0 to 15 minutes, this is when the car was traveling its fastest. And so that's why this would be the correct answer. So let me just erase these off here, and then we'll move on to the next. So the last 2 questions that we're going to look at are going to require a bit more calculation. So the first question here says, what speed did the car travel at from 45 to 60 minutes? So we are looking at a time frame of right here, 45 to 60 minutes. And so at 45 minutes, it was at 25 kilometers. And by 60 minutes, it was at 0 kilometers traveled, more kilometers traveled. But in essence, what it had traveled was it had traveled 25 kilometers. And it had traveled this not over an hour, because most of the time when we talk about speed, we talk about kilometers per hour. But in this case, what we're talking about is we're talking about a 15-minute time frame. So just so we're clear, I am going to just explain this to you. So 15 minutes over 60 minutes is, and if we plug this into our calculator, 15 divided by 60, and I'll do that in a second, but that's going to be 0.25. So it is a quarter of an hour that we have done if we have 15 minutes that have passed. So now what we are saying is that this car has traveled 25 kilometers over 0.25 of an hour. So that's point, I'll just make that a little bigger, 0.25 of an hour. And so that's what we're going to actually plug into our calculator. So let's just switch screens here, and I'll go into my calculator here so we can take a look at this. So what, first of all, we'll just look at is 15 minutes divided by 60 minutes is in fact 0.25. So that's where we got the 0.25 of an hour. Now, in order to figure this out, though, we have to figure out how much distance we traveled, which was 25 kilometers, and then divide it by the period of time, which in this case was 0.25 of an hour. And when we do that, it gives us 100. So what we're saying is that this vehicle traveled 100 kilometers over an entire hour of period of time. So if I were to come back into this question, then that is why this is going to be, the answer is going to be 100 kilometers an hour, because it's basically 25 kilometers over 0.25 of an hour is going to be equal to 100 kilometers over an entire hour. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So let's take a look at one more of those, because that's probably a little bit difficult. So I'll just erase that off for you again here, and then move to the next question. So looking at this one here now, it says here, what speed did the car travel at from 15 to 30 minutes? So let's take a look at what we're seeing here. So the first thing is that we are going to be focusing on this period of time, 15 to 30 minutes. So we have a point here, and we have a point here. Now, it's kind of hard to tell exactly what that is, but I'm going to guesstimate that as 8. So that's 8 kilometers. And this is just a little bit above that, so it looks like it's 26. So the distance we traveled was basically the difference between 26 kilometers and 8 kilometers. So if we do the math on that, we will do that. We'll use our calculator here in a second, but really what that adds up to is 18 kilometers. So we went 18 kilometers, and we did that over 15-minute period of time. And once again, from our last question, hopefully you remember that 15 minutes is another way of saying 0.25 of an hour. So it's over 0.25 of an hour. And so this is going to, when we plug into the calculator, will tell us our speed. So let's take a look at, let's put this in the calculator and see how this works. So first thing is, let's just double check. We said that 26, which is how fast it was at its peak there, minus the 8 kilometers an hour that had 8 kilometers that traveled at the beginning is 18. So that's where we get the 18 kilometers we traveled. And then we're going to divide this by 0.25. And so when we do that, we're going to get 72 as our answer. So that means that we are traveling 72 kilometers an hour. And so if I were to go back to this question here, that is why this is the correct answer, 72 kilometers per hour, because once again, that is the distance we traveled, which we determined was the difference between 26 minus 8. So that's the 18 kilometers. And we did this over 15 minutes, which is once again simply 0.25 of an hour. And so when we go 18 divided by 0.25, we end up with an answer of 72 kilometers per hour. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Hope that is enough to get you started and working and doing well on this mathletic assignment. Once again, if you have any questions though, please do not hesitate